Hey friends, here I am back with another video. So today I kind of wanted to talk about Shounen and just the genre itself, but also like the difference between modern Shounen and old Shounen, because I feel like people don't talk about this enough, so I really wanted to talk about it myself. Because I feel like when you talk about the old and the new, you can kind of see how Shounen is actually starting to evolve over time. And it's a really interesting thing to discover, I feel like. So I'll break it down to you what I mean. So when we talk about Shounen, right, the genre itself, not the actual, like, book definition. Obviously, we all know the book definition is, oh, it's for young men, right, or young boys, basically. We all know that doesn't really fit the bill, because that's like, oh, seinen is for older boys or men. It doesn't really explain what the genre is like, where if you think about it, Shounen is usually a story about a main character that goes through trials and tribulations, the typical hero's journey. But it's usually like a power-up anime. It's usually got adventure elements to it. There's like a team, if you will, like a special team force or something that the main character either leads or joins. Like, there are these traditional patterns that we're all used to seeing and calling, oh, that's a shonen anime. We all know what we mean. Shonen Jump itself has kind of like defined what it means to be a shonen. And then obviously when we think about seinen series, right, we're talking about like Tokyo Ghoul. Talking about things that have darker tones that are more adult in theme. So you would say, okay, some anime like Jrwtih Kaisen, right? They kind of glide that line in between. Like, it's got shonen elements, but it's very mature. So it's also very seinen when you think about it, right? Whereas like Naruto starting off, that was just a shonen. There was no discrepancy there. Or you have something older where it's like, okay, this is a very mature story, so like Monster, right? Like, that's a seinen, obviously. So, just to kind of give an idea, like, we're not going to go off of those definitions because they're not very clear, is what I'm trying to get at. But we all know what a shonen is like. So, when we talk about normal shonen, quote-unquote old shonen, right? We're talking Bleach, Naruto, Dragon Ball, One Piece. All of these animes, the main character has a very selfish goal, typically. Like, the main character wants to get stronger, the main character wants to find the One Piece, the main character wants to become Hokage, right? They all kind of have a specific goal in mind, and the story that's wrapped around them is kind of like set behind, oh, this person's going to reach that goal. So how are they going to get there? We kind of know how the story is going to end. And I think that's super cool. It's fine. It's something that's very traditional we're all used to. But when we look at modern shonen, the reason this is compelling to me is we have these new characters that have kind of come into the modern scene, like Tanjiro, like Itadori. Like, yes, they have goals, but when you think about like Tanjiro's goal in Demon Slayer, right? Outside of like protecting Nezuko, his goal is not really set in stone. Like, he's kind of just thrown into the environment, and then he comes to the conclusion, I have to slay demons, right? In the same way that like Itadori from Jrwtih Kaisen, he just was living his life. And even after becoming a sorcerer, the story time and time again has challenged his goal over and over. Every time he found like a will or like something to fight for, the story says, nope, that's stupid. What do you really want? What do you really want? What are you really here for? And over again. And now like we're at the modern like point of the story, right? Where I think everyone's seen the new season at this point, but yeah. He's not trying to have a goal anymore because he's realized after the story is kind of punched into him over and over again, you having a goal, your goal is always wrong. Your goal has been worthless. So you're a cog now, right? You're okay with that? And he is. And that's the scary part. But like, I say that to say, you have these more modern characters. Tanjiro, Itadori, some other series, they're not looking for anything specific. If anything, I'd say the only like current story right now that is like a shonen is Black Clover, because Black Clover characters like Asta and Yuno, obviously they want to become the Wizard King, but like when you look past those, all the other ones are very different. Even like Vinland Saga right now, Thorfinn's entire like goal started off not being super, you know, shonen-ish. I mean, it still kind of had elements, but a revenge story is what it is, right? But if you look at him now, he's completely different. Like, his goal is kind of like, what, world peace? I mean, it's lofty. I can't say it's not a goal, but it's not like a shonen goal that we're used to, right? And I think a lot of shonen has kind of been changing like that over time. We have great examples. We have like Food Wars, where yeah, he's meant to become like a really great chef and everything, but he's not like trying to necessarily be the #1 chef. He's trying to be the best in the school, and that's fine. Well, he's very content with like the life he grew up with and being in a diner and everything. And that's really cool to see Yukihiro do. Or you have stuff like Dr. Stone, which is a perfect example for what I'm talking about. Literally looking at Senku and his goal of, oh, I want to bring humanity back to the modern day. It's so massive. It's such a massive undertaking that it's almost impossible, and I think he's aware of that. But that's kind of what makes him like kind of fit into that ball of what I'm talking about, of like the modern shonen character. The modern shonen characters usually have this giant goal that's bigger than life itself, that is more or less impossible to obtain, and they either aren't fixated on it, or it is just a means of like what their cause is fighting for, but they're not like driving the point home of being at the peak of something. They just want to achieve something that is in the right direction, I feel like. And it's really cool to watch how we don't have to have shonens that are always about punching people in the face anymore, right? Like, I love, you know, Naruto and Luffy and Dragon Ball, like, it's all good stuff. But when you think about it, yeah, they just kind of want to be the best at what they do, and they go out there and they punch everybody, and that's how they solve problems. Where you have characters like Yukihiro, where he's got to come up with a different recipe, but he's got to study, he's got to do his homework. Senku knows a lot, but he has to learn. Even though I know everything about like how to survive and science and all that, and that gives me a great advantage. If I don't learn how to manage and work with people, all of it's useless. And we see that time and time again, where the knowledge he has is great, but if he doesn't learn how to hold and maintain his relationships and navigate different like situations, whether that be political, emotional, or just other relationships that he has yet to encounter, it all is important. It's all important to his success, and he's aware of that, and that's why when he has his shortcomings, it's even more compelling in the story, right? Because as a shonen, the way challenges are structured, they're always very high stakes. They're always going to push the character to the metal. And it's really compelling, in my opinion, to see a character like Senku that isn't combat ready. He doesn't have some super power-up story. Like, there's nothing. He doesn't charge ki, right? But he has to take on people that feel like they do. Like, he's got to take on a Tsukasa, right? And that's pretty crazy to me. But I think that's what makes it really cool. Even with stuff like Beastars, right? You have a character like Legoshi. He's constantly fighting against not only himself and his own nature, he's fighting against the society that he was born into, and just the natural animal instincts that every race has, on top of his own like personal feelings and emotions that he wants to push forward. But it's cool to see how he kind of like rejects all of his different like ideology, and he kind of lives his own life outside of what, you know, his typical race does. But then when you really get down to it, he starts to reject against society as well, and he goes through his training arc. It's cool, but at the end of the day, if you know, you know, when he has his big fight, all of that hard work he did to be something different, we watched him regress into doing the one thing that he had always looked down on, as if this is not something I should ever succumb to. And that way of storytelling, I think, has just been really unique and interesting. And we've just seen it like slowly grow like that as a genre. Because I feel like a lot of genres, like romance, for example, right? Romance itself is a very static genre. There are different ways you can tell a romantic story. There are different like sizes or types of people that you can put into the two main romantic characters, right? But I also feel like it can be very difficult to really flesh out how this romance should work, how things should be structured. Because to make it unique, it's more about the personalities themselves. And I feel like a lot of them lean into rom-com, right? As we know, romantic comedy. Because comedy is kind of that entertainment factor that the romance needs to push itself forward. Because normal, natural romantic conflicts that happen in relationships are not always super fun and pretty. Nobody wants to constantly watch a show where the characters are going through pain all the time. And that's kind of how you end up with like slop series like Domestic Girlfriend, where like it's a romance, yes, but it's so messy. But that's what real life relationships are like. But nobody likes it sometimes because it just makes you feel kind of icky. Whereas like the romantic comedy is great. Like we're all having a great time. Yeah, there's drama, but it's like drama that's contained at a certain limit, right? And only some shows really go out of their way to push that limit forward. So here's my thing. Shounen has changed, and it's been changing, and I'm excited to see how it continues to change. And I think the biggest difference that we can see is Shounen is kind of wrapping itself into different genres, right? So you have things like Talentless Nana, you have things like Dr. Stone, even Promised Neverland, where like halfway through the story, it started off as like a thriller and a mystery, and then it just pivots straight into a Shounen. And you get to Goldie Pond, you're like, whoa, Emma's going up against crazy things that like we would have never thought a character like this to go through. But she's technical, she's calculated, and she doesn't have physical prowess to fight the demons that she's dealing with. But her intelligence is what takes that story forward. And it's nice to see intelligence is being put forward in genres like Shounen. And we don't always have to see, you know, the brawn, the power. Don't get me wrong, I love watching Seven Deadly Sins 2 and Meliodas and Escanor saying their like fire lines and just boom, boom, boom. Like, it's great. Don't get me wrong. But I like seeing how everything else is kind of like its own thing now. And you can see like, okay, the Shounen is added to it. It's kind of like Shounen takes over. Shonen's the wrapper, but when you like open it up, there's a new flavor in there. And I really enjoy that. I like that a lot of creators have started to do that. And I'm enjoying the direction, because usually when we see a genre take a different direction, everybody starts copying it and it doesn't really feel that good. Like Madoka Magica being the type of story that it was. After that, Magical Girl animes changed forever. Some for better, some we know they're just clones, right? It's not too great. But watching how we have stories like Jujutsu Kaisen now, right? We have stories like Demon Slayer now, where yes, they have shonen foundations in the core of how the stories are structured, but those shonen foundations make the mature themes that they start sinking into later feel all the better. And I feel like the fusion of seinen and shonen as a whole has just done nothing but to enhance plots and stories. And that's how you get these different things, right? These very complex narratives like Chainsaw Man, like Jujutsu Kaisen, like Demon Slayer, where over time they really start to bloom, because you kind of see how all of those different elements, all those different like mending of the genres or genre shifts or decisions that the writers are making really kind of bring everything together. But anyway, that's the video. I'm not going to yap too long, but honestly, share your opinions in the comments if you think I'm crazy, or you think I'm kind of have the right idea, or maybe you agree with me but you just don't think I'm using the right words, and that's completely fine. So, you know, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. But I'm gonna go because I have more stuff I want to record. But thank you for your time and have a good one. Bye.